Hello, I'm Alice Hiller, and I'd like to welcome you all very warmly to this Voicing Our Silences workshop and performance with Vasiliki Albedo, Mary Mulholland, and Simon Maddrell. They'll be performing from and sharing their brilliant joint pamphlet, All About Our Mothers, from 9 pens, and also using it as the basis for prompts for your own work. Of course, the word mother speaks to each of us individually. We may think of our own mothers or their absences from our lives, or indeed those who mothered or mismothered us in their places, irrespective of gender. As a baby passes from the half dark of a mother's containing body into the half light of the wider world, so there is both darkness and light in the relationship between a mother and a child thereafter. Sometimes more darkness, sometimes more light. In the case of Vasiliki Albedo, whose heart-catching poems begin all about our mothers, there is an abundance of darkness, which ultimately becomes its own form of light. As many of you will know, Vasiliki is widely published, everywhere from Ambit to the Poetry Salzburg Review. Her work has been placed with great distinction in competitions from the National Poetry Competition to the Hippocrates Awards. Her stunning, moving debut, Phare in the Oubliette, was published by Live Canon in 2020. Vasiliki's poems open all about our mothers like a darkened sun. They trace the arc of that sun's day through their sequence. This dawns with the speaker on her mother's shoulders in Pine Summit, and she's shooting my 1-year-old arms to a needle sky. What follows can feel hard to read for the honesty and necessity which the poems give witness to the mentally unstable mother's mistreatment of her young daughter. Like Pascal Petit, Vasiliki captures the quicksands and lightning shifts that destabilize a child's sense of self, whether she's locked out all night, repeatedly humiliated, or forced to care for a drunk parent. For all their pain, though, these poems offer the gift of holding in language what might otherwise seem unbearable. They take us to the sunset of the mother's ending and its curtailed gestures towards forgiveness, even as the final poem, Encore, resists easy resolution. In my window, the sun is a blind, rising and falling, trapped in between. Following Vasiliki Albedo, Mary Mulholland has been widely published and placed with distinction in competitions from the Bridport to Wasafiri. Mary also founded and co-edits the game-changing Alchemy Spoon and runs Red Door Poets, where music and poetry meet and join. Musicality is central to Mary's poems in All About Our Mothers. Her opening poem, Things Our Mothers Couldn't Teach Us, finds a quivering scrap, mossy grey-brown, the wrong shape for a rat. It's a leveret or baby hare, born self-sufficient from birth, whom the speaker rescues off the side of a road in heavy rain and returns in the morning to find gone, hopefully saved. Thereafter, Mary's mother figure is as longed for as she is elusive. Musical, enchanting, sometimes singing as she peels potatoes, she's absorbed by the far away. The sea is sleeping, calls back her magical, tropical childhood of picking fresh grass for the manatees, but being so poor they left food at your door. If these are poems of loss, they are also poems of finding a place of fracture and understanding that it contains its own wholeness. Finally, Simon Maddrell's poems also perform acts of restoration and retrospective healing. Widely published, everywhere from Ambit the Moth to Stand, his compelling debut pamphlet, Throatbone, came out in 2020 with Uncollected Press, while the fierce, pared back, brilliant queer fella jointly won the Rialto pamphlet competition. The mother in Simon's poems is one who defines her family by absenting herself from it. She leaves her husband and 2 young sons for a bedsit filled with 52 shoeboxes. Like Mary's and Vasiliki's work, these are poems which hold love and sadness and anger as intermingled as spring weather. In Simon's case, they also leaven it with dry humour. Dashes of reported speech fizz with all the brio of soda splashed into a spritzer. The poem's heart beats hardest in the revelatory she never came unannounced. At last, a very difficult wartime childhood, followed by a spell in Holloway, is revealed. Innocence flushed out of the cracks. Telling it makes her crumple like a bat-bird broken as the evening chased the sun to the moon. The poem ends. Then there was a stillness and a song. Through sometimes difficult materials, All About Our Mothers offers the deep reward of finding words to voice long-held silences and speak complex truths. The world becomes more fully present to us for what they reveal, as you'll see for yourselves. It's now my great pleasure to hand you over to Vasiliki Albedo, Mary Mulholland, and Simon Maddrell.
Thank you so much, Alice, as ever, as kind and generous. I'm Simon Maddrell. I welcome you all to our Voicing Our Silences. As you probably picked up, this is based on a joint collaboration between Vasiliki, Mary and myself, published by 9 Pens, which is a new anthology series of 9 poems each from 3 poets. So this evening we're running a little bit beyond time, but the idea of this evening we're going to go through readings. I'm going to kick us off, followed by Mary and then Vasiliki. After that, Vaz is going to facilitate a discussion about the collaboration. So we're going to talk about how the book came about and how we went about this sort of fairly unique way of publishing. And we'll also have a discussion about some of the subject matter that we addressed and how that relates to voicing our silences. There'll be a chance to ask some questions through chat. And then the last half an hour, we're going to do some poetry exercises with the the aim of that really for you to collect some material to write your own mother poem, whether that be about your own or someone else's. Just a quick request. If you do have any questions, can you please put them into chat, and sort of during our discussion, we'll have a look there and endeavour to answer them, either during each of those discussion points or straight afterwards. So as I say, hopefully around about 30 minutes, we'll have the 3 readings. So we'll kick off with myself. I do need to give some trigger warnings here in terms of when these poems, there are some references to parental abuse, suicide attempt, unnatural deaths and hospitals. There was a hole in the soul of my trainer. Mum walked out on Dad that January. I thought it was our fault. I wore my trainers all the time. I was 9 and school didn't care. Summer holidays were so full of cricket. Our ball fell apart at the seams. I flattened its 4 parts out and used one for the sole of my shoe. I don't know when I got a hole in the other, but it was wet and winter. When I told Dad, he just looked. We drove to the shop to buy new shoes. He never asked me why I hadn't told him. I visited Mum in her bedsit. One wall was full of shoe boxes. I counted them. There were 52. This poem is She Never Came Unannounced. I'm very proud to say it was published in Ambit last year. She never came unannounced, but that afternoon the door knock did. Mums don't need to ask to sit, but she did. Crouch on a dining chair in the lounge. Mums don't need to ask to speak, but she did. Punch memories out with her truth, splattered around the hearth. In 1938, not 1992, the teacher spotted the blood running on the playground, draining its way from her head with a hole the shape of a mother's left stiletto heel. The evacuee sent on a long country vacation, her baby sister left behind, both collecting a stash of happy childhoods for future masquerades. Innocence flushed out of the cracks after being dropped on the pavement outside her home, a welcome mat face down behind a locked door. Leaving a child seamstress in Shoreditch Triangle, an unreconstructed jigsaw littered with war's holes, open wounds at home, a sweatshop with a girl in the owner's attic. Mum hid in a raincoat on the street corner, handing out sweets and magazines just for that one little girl. Too young to remember her sister until their mother banned glossies and gobstoppers for free. After all those bells and lemons of 16 years, self-sacrifice from London Bridge seemed a duty. Faltering, she landed in Holloway instead. Released, she devoted herself to 50 years of nursing. Mums don't need to ask to sit, but she did. Crumple on 4 wooden legs like a blackbird broken as the evening chased the sun. to the moon. Then there was a stillness and a song. Thank you. So the next two poems I'm going to share screen. If I can, excuse me. Oh gosh, sorry, that's the wrong one. Sorry about that. I knew I would do that. So hopefully you can see that now. This poem is called Rabbit Shocked. Leaving at midnight with Penny, the lurcher, not the mother, with headlamp, car battery and bailing string, spotting rabbits until one freezes the lamp's gaze. Nearly 3 a.m. and 6 startled eyes run around the field. The rabbit escapes. Penny wanted to sleep, as nothing was going to die soon. The mother's nurse advised him to leave the green floors and curtains and to grab a torch and batteries for his flight. At 3 a.m. along a remote Manx road, death hits a rabbit with its offside light. Back home, he slits the unlucky rabbit pit to throat. An errant knife spills biles over a life not yet ready. Its innards grasped and dropped to the side. At 3 a.m. along a remote Kenyan road, news hit a man with the death of his mother. Back home, he peels the gutted rabbit, rolls it in flakes of salt, its head now enclosed, skin hanging like a mother's fur coat. It's warm for someone else. At 3 a.m, the death of the mother was nothing natural, like being hunted by a cancerous lamp. Back in the ward, a doctor, too tired even to drive, pushed more relief than her pain could take. Back in a room, the man kissed her red lipstick, a familiar taste laid out in heroin chic. The next poem, I probably should just clarify that for the whole of my life, my mum was known as Penny, even though she was christened Kathleen Patricia. It was a name that was never ever used, not without a sharp rebuke anyway. Excuse me, I need to just drink some herbal stuff. So this poem is Penny. A dark African night pierced by an alien ship. The moon cracked open with a rattled breath. That last lingering look past the ice cream curtain, a cardiac rock, grief split, the belly, a desert hollow. The lady at the opera, darkened lipstick washed, opium lipped kiss, white-faced Penny, our mum. That's Kathleen Patricia. The lady in the morgue, darkened records washed, indigo-lipped kiss, white-faced mum, our Penny. Their last living look, long past their bedside guilt, her cardiac rock, lungs split, the green-cloaked death's secrets on a dark Somerset ward. Pierced by a fatal drip, the moon promise cracked with a rattled breath. So the next poem is called Kipper. The doctor and his witness greet me with a pair of kippered hands. Convention dictates, he alone, cat whispers. Go home and start the grieving process. You won't find anything here. After he fired mum's medical notes, a dead herring full of rotting smoke, my ears smelt of his guilt for 9 years. They led me down that small alley with white walls and the same gutters where we met before. The truth let go, exploding into brick walls, turning into brick walls and gaslights, burning like toast in a double yolked slice. This poem is elegy after a friend of mine, Fiona Moore, who I've known since long before both of us were writing poetry. I'm still waiting for someone to ask, was she murdered then? Of course, she was only killed, but still died before she should. She was visited by a man late at night with a needle he threaded the last stitch in her blanket. His identical twin popped by later with a tall cloak, a black-holed face, deep as a volcano's throat. The final poem, this is the church's oak creaks into silence. The carnations sea, already pink, mother carried in a ship of griefs, leaking on a stained aisle carpet, speckled with stained glass sun. The organ plays its satanic hymn, self-appointed saints jostle in pews, brass faith in a stone-faced tower. Dirty water churns in an empty font. The eulogy spills over rows of wood, dark suits weep on rose printed tissues, as if anyone cares for badly drawn ties and pinholes where poppies never die. An orphan's cup smells of bitter almonds, brown fringed lilies held on a broken swing. Thank you so much for listening. And now it's my pleasure to pass you on to the wonderful Mary Mulholland. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon. That was really wonderful, a wonderful start. And thank you also, Alice, for the lovely introduction. So I'm going to read 4 poems. And just by way of introduction, my mother was Portuguese Guyanese, and she had the beautiful lilt of the Caribbean in her voice. She died 15 years ago, and since then I've often mused about how well did I actually know her, or does anyone know anyone? And as the youngest of 3 girls, which is a significant position in myth and fairy tale, my mother felt to me like a very magical person, and I've tried to capture some of that and the complexity of what magic means in the poems. Fault lines. Everywhere I hear it in the wind, a whisper, where are you from? And once more I'm on a frozen lake, crying, I am empty, can see no shore, nothing sure. I have only your stories and scripts, such fragile foundations, for the ice is fracturing. All I know is where you were was home. Was home where you were? All I know is the ice is fracturing, such fragile foundations, for I have only your stories and scripts, nothing sure, can see no shore. I am empty, and once more I'm on the frozen lake crying, where are you? From everywhere. I hear it in the wind. a whisper. My next poem is Things Our Mothers Couldn't Teach Us. One last bend of the 5-hour drive in a November storm. My headlights flash on a quivering scrap. Mossy, grey-brown, the wrong shape for a rat. I step into rain. The voice in my head says, find a stone. I raise my arms to its near lifeless form. It blinks. I crouch down, lift it, the size of a hand, and half of that is ear. Ludicrous ears, sodden fur. I stroke it, a tremor, a moth-wing heart in a still pool. I was told the cry of a dying hare echoes our souls. How does anyone tune into their leaden? Hares are self-sufficient from birth, but must learn self-defense, to box and run zigzag. Their mothers can't help. Jills are busy with their moon living, pounding a mixture for immortality. So many cars speed by, but I stay until the rain stops. I'm wet through. The leveret is warmer. It's moving. I lay it on the verge, below the hedgerow. Return in the morning. No sign it was there. My last two are set in Guyana, where my mother was born and grew up. She lived in Georgetown, which is below sea level, so there's a seawall separating the sea from the capital. And this is where people take their constitutionals, so that's referred to, and it's quite a feature. The sea is sleeping. When I wake in the night, I see a black mirror. I'm standing by the Georgetown seawall. In the waves, I hear you breathing. I'm thinking about the stories we make of our lives, if even facts can be shifted. My broken family, all that ever matters is the heart. Constitutionals in the botanic gardens, picking fresh grass for the manatees, feeding your hen, your pet monkey. Rosa held your hand as rioters torched houses. Yours was spared out of their love for Daddy. 7 father orphans in grandmother's care. At school you were charity. You were all so poor, your mother abroad. They left food at your door. When invited to a government house party, you made your dress from a curtain. On your father's headstone, the word regretted bled like a heart. Anger, fire in the heart. Sadness, a drowning heart. When you died, your brain was still bleeding, and the waves drew back, exposing the silt. And my final poem is The Art of Daydreaming, which was published a year ago by Poetry News. My mother gazes beyond the garden, a capuchin in the rhododendron. She hears tree frogs in the ticking of the grandfather clock. My mother has sugarcane blood, is made of mango. She is pineapple, dresses in laughter, passes darkness to her big-boned daughter to wear. Sometimes my beautiful mother sings as she peels potatoes. Her voice is alto. When she tries soprano, she's a spider monkey. My beautiful mother's rings are loose on her fingers. She believes rubies and gold will bring her good luck. She likes to lose herself in dreams. And had I not gone to that Almodovar film that I didn't enjoy, I'd have answered her call, not heard her voice late, too late to call back, naming me in her sing-song way, as if saying goodbye. Sometimes we just get it wrong. That night, I was too big-boned dumb. By next morning, my beautiful mother is wading back to childhood, ankle deep in warm rain. My mother is an Amazonian water lily, afloat on dark water. Her petals unfurl like paper decoration. She doesn't see the caiman's amber eyes waiting, a green anaconda dangling from a branch, the harpy eagle that'll soar her to the canopy's green mantle. My mother doesn't like green. Her breathing is the ocean. She is rushing in to pause on the Demerara silt shore, then rushing out to rejoin the horizon. Her waves are thrashing the seawall. She's wearing foam lace, ribboning the air with clouds that shape-shift are turning electric blue. My butterfly mother is sky. Thank you. That's all from me. And now it's my great pleasure to hand over to the wonderful Vasiliki.
Thanks so much, Mary. And what beautiful readings from both of you, Simon and Mary. I love those poems so much. And your readings were so moving. It's just a joy and a pleasure to hear them again. And thank you so much, Alice, for that incredible introduction. I feel really heard. I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully you can see that now. Like a lot of children, I was regularly slapped, occasionally beaten, but this is a poem about standing up to my mother. I tell my mother I'd rather stand outside all night than go to sleep, and she lets me. The tiles were hot all through the night. I stood, locked out, back up against the poxy clapboard bungalow, counting hours, counting stars. First light she came for me, dragged me to her foggy, violet room, slapped, then said she would not slap me anymore. Now I was 8, she could end up in jail, and barked, "You look me in the eye." I drew my gaze from her forehead down to her deep mahogany stare, and the crystal angels on her dresser spun as my palm rose to smart her cheek just once. There was a belief when I was growing up that milk will make children grow taller. And my mother was, for some reason, anxious that I grow tall. So I wasn't allowed to drink water at home until I was about 10 or 11 years old. I watch a bear eat her sick cub. At home, water is forbidden. Mother says, I must only have milk. She believes it's panacea for failing, sulky girls. But secretly, I drink the faucets dry. Mother suckles her cherub, my little brother, gives me cartons of curdy, Dutch milk. She offers her green, gigantic breast, asks me if I'm jealous. Her milk is pink with blood and pus. Nights, I bite holes into the dress she makes me wear. When she tugs the neckline shrieking, I whisper that my brother did it. Drink the milk, she says. It'll make you taller. And I raise another fever. Once, I too suckled, felt the syrup sour on my tongue. Now I sweeten at a distance. She bolts me in my room. The cold season snaps heads of statues in the park where she walks with my brother in her arms. I make it rain as I stare at them through the window. My heart ripens like a nightshade. The next poem is about a time my mother came to visit me at school. Mother in Fur. On the news, the open face close-up zooms me back to my childhood. The anchor is speaking, but it's my mother she is reciting as she reports on the war and someone mauled at the zoo. She blinks, and her eyes are an event horizon from which my mother backflips. She appears in my bedroom, fully made up, in her freshly skinned coat. Marilyn Monroe, mauve. She sways past me into a flamboyant skyline where her cigarette lights clouds on fire. After commercials, she's back in the anchor's fresh lipstick coat. When she enters the room, it feels as if there's just been a murder for which no one will ever be charged. The anchor wishes us a good evening and presents the aftermath of the latest bomb strike. Years ago, I was at school when Mother paid me a visit, saying she'd missed me, stamped a kiss on my lips, caressing my cheek with her diamond when she was wearing nothing under her fur and only came to meet the headmaster I had a crush on. In other news, a hurricane is heading our way. The anchor advises, seal all windows and shelter. I had a few sessions with a local therapist when I was about 8 years old. The therapist gave me a stray kitten thinking that it would help. Therapy cat. The lame cub, a lioness left to the eagles, took me back to my 8th birthday and the analyst's gift of a piebald kitten. She called it a therapy cat, but my mum confined it to the 2nd floor balcony. It'll ruin the house, it'll ruin the house. Each night when I slept, she'd toss it out, and each morning I'd pick it out of a pot in the garden, limping and frightened. Let it go, it wants to go back to its mother. At 13, I came home from school to find my room arranged into my brother's. I threw out your things, stay at your father's. For years, I dreamed Therapy Cat had morphed into a winged lioness, her limbs whole and inviolate. We'd meet in my room and ride into a fictive sunburst. And in that light, there was nowhere that wasn't home. And my last poem, Last Day. The morphine drip tides you quiet, and I sit on the hospital steps. 7 years of cancer, and still we haven't reconciled. How many times I've sat on the granite blocks outside our complex, locked out, not knowing where you are or if you're coming back. And when you did, slurring apologies, I'd wipe your salting makeup, cook you breakfast. Remember that Christmas when you gave me a shawl for the cold and a letter from Santa that listed the ways I had upset you? For days, you have been talking to your dead mother. I overheard your conversations, how you said you don't want to leave me, said you can't forgive me. I never told you about the neighbor who took me in when it was raining, made me eggs and gave me keys to her apartment. How I grew there. Soon I will come into the ward, cup your hand, take the oxygen mask away to let you kiss me. I love you. I'm sorry, echoing between us. Thank you.
Vasiliki, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And Simon too. And after all the readings, I'm going to invite everybody who's here to close their eyes and just take a really deep breath into the stomach, into the pit of the stomach. Breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth, and let all the images just sort of settle. So if you could just do that once more. In through the nose and out through the mouth. And with one final one. With a sigh, let it go. And now we hand back to Vasiliki.
Thank you, Mary. We're now going into the question part, the interview part of our event. And Mary, would you like to share how we all got to know one another?
Yes, I mean, on the one hand, we don't know each other at all in that we haven't actually met. Well, Simon and I did overlap in a poetry workshop for a term, but I'm not sure we talked much to one another. But on the other hand, we've now all become really good and supportive friends. And this is probably it's all thanks to Zoom and COVID. So there are some good things that come from that. I've known Vasiliki's name for a few years from online poetry courses we've both been on. And as I say, I overlapped with Simon for a term in a live poetry school course. But it was Zoom and lockdown that through that Vasiliki joined the workshop. And the three of us, once it changed to online, would sometimes send messages during the class or afterwards, or through email. And so that was really how we all came together and came to be friends.
Thank you, Mary. And Simon, would you like to say a few words about how we started this collaboration, how we chose the subject matter, and what process we followed from then on?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, after I left that course, Mary, I remember we set up the small poetry collective, the Crocodile Collective.
Yeah.
They're all sort of ex-poetry school chums. I heard about the call out from Nine Pens, sorry. And as soon as I saw the thing of it's a collaboration between three poets, I immediately thought, Mary and Vaz, for reasons that I'm sure that you already realize why I would make that call. So I contacted them and actually suggested initially that we did a pamphlet on grief. And Mary, in the spirit of the holiness of minute particulars, as William Blake puts it, suggested that we focused on mothers, which was a great idea, and that's what we did. And in actual fact, we collaborated so much on it, we ended up doing all about our fathers as well. But yeah, that's sort of how it what prompted it, if you like.
Thank you, Simon. Yes, maybe I'll say a couple of words about how we edited, how we went about editing and putting together the anthology. So we initially shared all our mother poems that we had. So we sent them to each other, and we had to choose 9. So we each ranked each other's poems. I think it was Mary who came up with the idea of putting a yes, no, or maybe next to each poem. And so we each ranked each other's poems according to our own taste. And we created some short lists. We chose the 9 poems. And then we thought about how they relate to each other. So our poems between each other, the 3 poets. And we found some themes, and that helped in choosing which poems would go into the anthology in the end. And then we gave each other editing suggestions on each poem, and ordering suggestions for each of our sections. And of course, throughout it all, the poet had the final call on which poems were going to go in, and on the edits as well. Does anybody want to add anything to this?
No, I think you've covered everything really. As you say, the poet has had the final say, but it was it was a really, I don't know, it just seemed to sort of come together very easily, as if maybe there was some energy from the mothers on the other side facilitating this, because they did seem to echo each other, and with the images, and as you said, which was lovely.
I mean, I think it's worth mentioning that we started off with it varied between each of us, but sort of 15, 20 plus poems about our mothers. So that was quite a process to then each other share which we thought were the ones that would work best, and come to that. And sometimes some poems were thrown in a bit later. I know Mary found another poem that she'd written that then came into it, and so that was, I guess, what's quite different about it as a collaboration that sort of differs from Nine Arches Primers, for example, is that in this case it was 3 poets coming together, choosing which poems were going to be together in this joint pamphlet, as opposed to a judge choosing 3 people independently. So from that perspective, we were able to pull together a theme, but then also work together in a way that I think made it so powerful, because there was no formal editor, so no one was telling someone which poems they had to exclude or which changes they needed to make. It was all us just giving suggestions, and the poet either took them on board, didn't take them on board for a while, eventually came round, or stuck to their guns, whichever, all of the above sort of thing, and that was what I think was one of the refreshing things about it for me.
Yeah, there was one other thing, which was there was a fairly tight time schedule, because Simon wanted us to get in ahead of the action, and so he was sort of saying, "Come on, we've got to do this." And so in choosing the subject matter, everybody has mother poems, a few of them hanging around, and so somebody had asked, did we all write them specifically for this? And no, a lot of them, the majority of them, are already written. I wrote, I think, one new one. I rewrote some of them. But I think for the majority, we already had them in the bag, so we were able to just dust them down and sort of knock them into shape.
Thank you, Mary. Yes. Could I ask, Mary, what does it mean to you to voice your silence in terms of poetry?
Well, voicing, that's a really interesting question. Voicing our silences, when Alice generously invited us to do this, I found myself thinking of it. So what is a silence? It's an unacknowledged truth. For me, voicing our silences means to speak that truth, to speak my truth. And it can be hard for those who've felt silence to dare to own their voice. So voicing our silences means acknowledging I have a voice in the first place, and to honour that as well. And then I found myself thinking about silence itself. What is that unacknowledged truth? Because it's also things that are not known, the dark holes of our history, that those intuitive hits and sort of untapped tears that we sometimes feel, or some of us can feel, or I certainly can. And so it's also the transgenerational silences that are taken to the grave, the secrets of families. And in my family, especially my maternal family, it's often felt like fumbling through fog. So my maternal family, about which I know very little, were taken to Guyana, most likely as indentured labour, then had to leave again following the likely murder of my grandfather. So it's about the silence of migrants as well, and a lot of dark history. Now, my daughter recently introduced me to a concept called anomia, which originated with the French sociologist Émile Durkheim, which means a form of normlessness, of being isolated, as if somebody suffered trauma that other people can't relate to. And this can result in a sense of not belonging, as if a loss of meaning. Even it can even to extreme lead to no longer willing to carry on. So for me, the most powerful experience is to be seen and heard. And thank you, Alice, for creating this platform. Thank you, Poetry. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And especially thank you, Vaz and Simon, for this wonderful collaboration. So that's my rather long-winded summarization of what voicing our silences means to me.
Such interesting and deep thoughts, Mary, and that's a very interesting concept as well, the anomia. We'll have to read more about it. Thank you very much for these words. Simon, would you like to say something about what it means to you to voice your silence in terms of poetry?
Two things really. One sort of is perhaps more general to all of my poetry. I'm a very big fan of the work of Brené Brown. If you've never heard of her, do listen to her first TED talk, Houston TEDx, and she talks about shame in a petri dish, and she says that all you need for shame to grow is silence, judgment, and secrecy. And it's all those things which I think poetry gives us the opportunity to speak. My family, really, as you can imagine, there was no real relationship with my mother's family. I mean, she went off as an evacuee at 10 years old, and her mother wouldn't let her back home. And she was she lived in a Jewish sweatshop attic, and worked as a seamstress before it all got too much for her. So that silence, and I think I'm sure that story and that poem, it was the first time that she'd ever told anybody that story. I'm almost certain that that's the case. So in many senses, my family and my father's family as well is fundamental foundations of secrets and lies, and I'm sure lots of families are the same. And in that environment, it's very easy, if you have triggers for shame, like your sexuality, for example, then and therefore it's full of judgment and full of secrecy, then you're in trouble. So I think that opportunity to voice those silences is a way of addressing shame. And I strongly feel that even though obviously everyone's experience is different, I didn't have for example, the dreadful experience that Alice went through, but listening to Alice talk her silences has such a resonance, and the authenticity of what she says cannot help but to change me as an individual as well. And I think if we do well in poetry, it's just to create emotional resonance in other people, even if the specifics are very different, in order to shift and to make change. The other thing I'd like to specifically mention, and again, it may, one of the things about, you notice that 2/3 of this poem is about, of the poems I read, are about the hospital killing my mother. I mean, my mum, she was a nurse for 50 years. And the last place in the world that she wanted to die was the hospital. And unfortunately, that is what happened. And being able to tell the truth of what happened has in many ways been healing for me, in a way of that situation not to eat me up. And the irony, of course, is that that for exactly the reasons that the hospital hid it, it means that they can't do anything about it, because I can tell the truth and they can't sue me, because the only way they'd win suing me is to use the evidence that they destroyed. So from that perspective, there's a sort of an interesting irony, if you like, that I'm able to voice that silence and to voice that truth without any fear of retribution, because the hospital destroyed the blood when the blood results were scientifically impossible. They changed the notes, and I know all of this. The doctor even told me that's what they'd done. So that chance to voice those things was freeing for me as well. So that's a specific example, and I'm sure there are other examples that other people may have of things that that by saying them out loud, they can at least resolve something through it. Sorry, that was a long answer, but
Thank you, Simon. No, that wasn't a long answer. That was a wonderful answer. And yeah, the power of naming things and the resonance that it creates through poetry, and the power of vulnerability and of unshaming, and of being able to disclose in such a way. There are some wonderful comments here. Patricia says, really enjoying the conversation. And Sarah says, such an interesting and perceptive conversation. Jeffrey says, a beautiful, precise, but expansive discussion of voicing silences. And Alice says, thank you, Simon. And I think she also previously thanked Mary for speaking with such thought and care. Creating emotional resonance to make change is so clearly put. And Chaucer says, well said, really well said, to transform that abuse through art. I wonder if there are any questions before we move into our prompt. Okay, well, maybe there will be a little bit of time in the end for questions, and then we can just pass into the prompt. Thank you very much, Simon and Mary, for these wonderful thoughts.
Okay, so now we're going to once more close our eyes, if you will. I invite you to put your feet on the ground and just do some deep breathing, because we've heard a lot of very poignant stuff, very difficult stuff, and so we're moving on to the creative part for you lot. It's important for you to be centered. So in through the nose, out through the mouth. Just concentrate on that breath, just filling up your lungs, and just feel the breath just floating down into you, into your body, into the pit of your stomach, and then release it and let everything go with a sigh. And then again, take the deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And then one final one. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit more centered now, and I'll hand you back to Simon for our first creative writing exercise.
Wonderful, thank you, Mary. Might be a chat if you haven't got paper and pen, or pencil is my god, then please do grab that. So we're going to spend perhaps the next 25 minutes. The principle of what we're going to do is not to write a poem necessarily, although that of course may happen, but really to help you create some material for a mother poem, whether that be your own or someone else's. And we're going to do that with a prompt exercise to give you the chance for a 7-minute free write, which I'm going to facilitate. And then we've got a couple of exercises, one by Mary, one by Vaz, to help you create some more material for a mother poem. So first of all, if you can write on your piece of paper, only a mother can, or if you prefer, only my mother can. It does change it quite a bit, I guess, but yeah, choose which one you prefer. And obviously, we're asking you to delve into this, so if anyone feels uncomfortable of the subject, then, we won't be offended if you step away. Okay. So now we've got a whole set of verbs. So what I'd like you to do is to look at those and just choose 3 of them as quick as you can, instinctively. Or indeed, if there's a verb that comes to mind of your own, then make a note of that too. So just 3. The ones that really sort of speak to you in some way or other. Is everyone done, or do you need more time? You need to give me a thumbs up if you, give me a sign. So only a mother can, 3 verbs. If you've done that, now put them in order, 1, 2, 3. The one that speaks to you the most, followed by the next, followed by the next. So for example, you may have only a mother can comb, only a mother can build, only a mother can teach. Just put them in the order that speaks to you the most, because you may or may not get to the other ones. Is everyone okay so far? If you need more time, give me a thumbs up if you're okay to move on. Steph, you need more time? Okay, so now you've got 3 verbs. So what we're just going to ask you to do now, sorry, Blah. Apologies. What we're going to ask you to do now is basically start top of the page, only a mother can, with your first verb, and then carry on writing. What we suggest you do is a free write, which I'm sure you all know is just to keep writing. And what we invite you to do is, when you feel like you've run out of time, following the example of the wonderful Caroline Bird, she would always say, keep going. So if you think you've run out of steam, then do it again. Only a mother can, verb 1. Do that twice more. If you really truly have run out and your 7 minutes hasn't run out, move on to your second verb and do it and keep going till you've run out of steam, and then move on to your third. Okay? So I'll just give you a little reminder at sort of 4 minutes and 6 minutes. So only a mother can, bump, and then keep writing, whatever comes to mind. So that's 4 minutes. You have another 3 minutes. You may drift off into a story, which is what I'm doing. Now at the last minute. Great, so there's your 7 minutes. Pens down, as the teacher would say. So what I suggest now is you just take a moment or two to look at what you've written and highlight, circle or underline any words or lines or sentences that you've written that you think are keepers, if you like. Or maybe you've gone off and written a full poem, in which case you might want to circle bits that you want to do more work on. But sometimes it's worth, and by doing that, you might find a particular phrase or sentence that you really love. You might want to scribble a note by it as well to remind you of why that particular thing you wrote down spoke to you. Maybe you were taken off somewhere else, and that jelly and ice cream that you had at the nursery school is something worth remembering for a particular reason.
Okay.
So thank you, Mary. Move to you.
Okay, thanks, Simon. That was great. Now, if you're ready for the next bit, it's a little bit like in musical composition, you go from the major to the minor to the major, or the minor to the major to the minor. So this is a little subversive interlude. So thinking of your mother or motherhood or anything to do with your mother, I would really invite you to first thought, best thought, think of 3 things that have some meaning or memory for you, but they could be animate or inanimate, vegetable, animal, mineral, it doesn't matter, but it has to be be something concrete. And I just want you to think of 3 that you can associate with your mother. I'll give you 1 minute for that. When you have your things, write a sentence or a line. Write a line about them, quickly as you can. Now, you might have only managed to do 1 or 2 of those words, it doesn't matter, but I now invite you to think of 3 things that are complete anathema in regard to your mother. So you can either choose the opposites of the words you've already chosen, or just think of 3 things that are really just not connected with your mother. And if you can, put them, the 3 of them, in a sentence each or a line each. Can anyone give any indication, like a thumbs up or a sort of full stop in the chat, to see how you're getting on with this? Okay, some of you are putting a thumbs up. So the final part of this very simple little exercise is to replace the first 3 chosen words with the second 3 chosen words. So they swap places. So the rest of the sentence remains the same, but you just have a swap of the chosen object or thought or vegetable, animal, mineral thing that you have there. So you just swap them round so that you get a rather unusual collection of images, which you can hopefully play with and may end up becoming something, may take you somewhere else. So that was my little thing. And the final one is to hand you back to Vasiliki, who has one as well, I think.
Yes, thanks, Mary. I think we're running quite short of time, but basically think of 3 scents that you associate with your mother. Could be linked to an event such as cooking or baking or going to the beach with your mother, or her perfume, or going to fuel your car, her car, going to the gas station. It could be anything really, but 3 specific scents that you associate with your mother, and try to describe that scent very specifically. So try to write into it beyond the sort of description of the scent. Now that you have your 3 scents and perhaps some events, I would invite you to take each one of them and write more into them, perhaps relate them to some other senses, or perhaps relate the event to something that comes later in your life that is similar to that event that the scent reminded you of, and create connections in this way. So just a couple of minutes and then we'll come to a close. So just wrap up whatever you are writing, and hopefully you should have some seeds for development into one or more poems from the different prompts and exercises. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Vaz. A couple of questions. There's one here, Mary, that I think I think you'd love to answer. About from Jeff, have you found that writing the silence is often traumatic? About your mother's allowed you to begin to or more fully understand and possibly empathise with your mother's life and circumstances?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something very magic about poetry, that when you clear the space to access hidden truths and secrets, things just arrive, and that's the magic of poetry. I really believe. I remember Evan Boland saying that when she was writing about Ireland and things, and it is extraordinary how it happens. So yes, it's very cathartic as well. I mean, I think it's more than cathartic, because I think that's just a bit too personal. So there's something that goes on in the whole process that is very healing personally, and is, yeah, it's creative. And you begin to realize that it's also true that I think I mentioned at the launch that as a mother myself, we are both the archetype and the human, and the human is one thing, it's very flawed, but the archetype is something that you're always going to fall short. You're never going to manage to attain that level. So you're sort of setting yourself up for failure immediately you become a mother, and that was something very beautiful too, that I sort of think, oh my God, all the things I've done wrong for my children. But it's how we go. It's all our life's journey, and this was a beautiful way I found of understanding things like this.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd like to add to that is, the poem "She Never Came Unannounced" that I read. Because there was so much silence over the fact that my mum left. My mum was so guilty, she never talked about it. My dad was so proud, he never talked about it. I ended up being, at 9-10 years old, an amateur therapist. So actually, my own thoughts and feelings on the matter were never expressed. I remember overhearing in the kitchen one of my aunties, I think they were saying it to my dad, "Oh, isn't Simon doing well? We're so surprised he's doing so well." And I remember even at that age, sat there seething, going, "Well, nobody's asking me how I am." Mm-hmm. Because nobody did. And that did cause problems with, my mum would just need to say something that would trigger me into anger. So most of the time I was very placid, always making and then she would say something about helping to teach me to cook when to bake, when she didn't. It was Mrs. Mills who taught me to bake. I'd blow up. And I realized that this was a problem, and I went to therapy, and the therapist suggested that I asked my mum if she would come. Some of it was sort of regression therapy, taking me back to try and get that 9-year-old to speak. And all credit to my mum, she came along to a session where that happened, and I always laugh because the therapist said to me at the time, "So what did you want to do when she left?" And I was there all scrunched up. I said, "I wanted to hit her with a handbag." Which, I mean, what more could you say, really, in terms of how that 9-year-old could epitomise everything that was. It was a handbag, her handbag, she needed to be hit with. And of course, my mum was crying her eyes out, and it was three or so weeks later, she knocked on my door and told me that story. And for me, that was her way of helping me understand why she found it so difficult to be a mother. I remember she always used to say, you were fine until you had a mind of your own, and I just couldn't cope. And she didn't have a very good role model, of course. So, I think it's a sort of slightly different answer to your question, Jeff, because I think, having that opportunity with my mum transformed our relationship. My mother was my best friend. until she died. She was my best friend. That's what it was transformed into. And being able to write about that has helped me more understand, because obviously you're trying to empathise and understand what it must have been like coming home at 14 years old and not being allowed back into your house, to be locked up in a prison at 16 years old, 15 years old, a woman's prison at 15 years old. Yeah, I think I feel more deeply that empathy that you were touching at, Jeff. Shaw's asked another question, which I'll quickly answer. She's asking about fear of residue or fear of censorship from the hospital by speaking those truths. And I think because my mum was living in Bath, I didn't have any fears of not being treated well by the hospital. I'll never move to Bath, that's for certain. So I didn't have any of those fears. And like I say, I know for one absolute 100% certainty what happened to my mum. So I haven't got any fear about that. And like I say, that because of course the balance of proof comes to them, and you know, they whitewashed the inquest. And anyway, my father had just 3 months earlier, when it eventually came around to the inquest, had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. So myself and my sister, all of our energy went into making sure my father did not die in a hospital, and that's what we achieved. So that was the greatest thing we could do for my mum, was not to take them to court and sue the bastards. It was to at least give Dad his wish, even when she couldn't have hers. So yeah, no, I mean, if they want to sue me, go ahead, bring it on, is what I would say. So I haven't got any fear at all. I don't know if there was any other.
Actually, I do have one comment. I just want to say that, I mean, you know, I think there are a range of answers to that question, obviously, and in some cases, you know, that kind of understanding or empathy certainly may just not happen. But I was curious to know with the three of you, because in my own experience, I think more interesting to me than anything else is the more that I've written about my family, I've actually begun to put myself somehow in their place and to understand in a way that I never could before what may have been motivating them. And that's been a really, really life-changing experience for me. So that poetry can do that is quite remarkable.
Yeah, sure.
And thank you for your wonderful readings. Got the book right here and I've really been enjoying it. This is the second time I've heard you read. I was at the launch and it's wonderful to hear the poems again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Vasiliki and Simon, for this as well. But thank you, Alice, most of all, and everyone here. But this is a wonderful platform.
Well, I mean, it's been an incredible evening, really sort of powerful. It was really interesting to hear how the poems kind of came together, because it's such a beautifully, it's like a very fine piece of marquetry. All the pieces of the pamphlet, you know, flow in and out of each other. So it was really illuminating to hear the process whereby that came about and see the sort of synchronicity and the flow between you. Because I think one of the things about poetry is we take our individual experience and find in it something that's universal. And when you're doing that, it's a three-way process. It's like a kind of breathing in and out to the world. You can really get some expansiveness and some kind of reach in there. And I felt that in your readings, that you were speaking from individual experiences, but you're also speaking to collective experiences and offering sort of pathways to illumination, to comprehension, and away from victimhood, because these stories that you shared all have difficult things in them. Mary, in your family's past, Vasiliki and Simon in your own childhoods, And the great tendency is to define people as victims or victors. And in fact, we can translate our positions by articulating our experience. We can transform ourselves from being a recipient to being someone with agency. And I think that's, for me, is key to the idea of voicing our silences, moving from things being done to you to being the doer, but being a doer who has sort of positive agency. And I really felt that in your 3 readings tonight. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you so much, and thank you for coming to hear us.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it made me think, sorry, made me think one thing. There was my shoe poem. Actually, for the first time, someone interpreted that poem as being negative about my mum. And going back to Jeff's point, what I realised, those final lines just came to me, and what I realised was that actually, you know, the shoe and the hole were a metaphor, and the silence over the shoes and the silence over the holes. That there was a reason why my mum had 52 pairs of shoes, and it wasn't because she was greedy. It's because of what the shoes were a metaphor for. And it was through that I gained a much, for me, gained a much greater empathy for what she was missing and why she felt she had to leave, because she wasn't getting the emotions that were being filled with shoes. And the same thing happened to me, really. Anyway, sorry, I thought I would just share that. It's maybe worth reading that poem again, deciding for yourself what the hole's a metaphor for and what the shoe's a metaphor for. I don't know.
Well, I think we'll all be revisiting these poems after this wonderful reading, and anyone who doesn't yet have them will be ordering them. Everything that we've spoken about is going to be up on the Voicing Our Silences website with links to buy. And I really sort of urge you to go deep with the work, and also to look at Vasiliki and Simon's other publications, which I'll also put the links up to. But and I think Simon, would you like to, unless there are any more questions, Simon, would you like to round up for us?
Yeah, sure. Well, really, thank you so much to everyone for being, of course, Alice, for curating this wonderful space, and doing so with such love and care, and also, of course, to my lovely Mary and Vaz for this wonderful experience of not just learning more about my own mother, but learning about yours too. And thank you for being such a lovely audience and attentive and listening. And yeah, please go safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much.